Hello, welcome or welcome back. It's good to have you back. I hope you enjoyed the second reading of Matot-Masei, which was about the green-faced girls and God's tax plan. Uh, Green-faced girls. We'll talk about that here in just a second, just briefly. This forehead plate, or head plate, depending on which version, translation you're reading there, um, that's really something powerful. We're finding out more and more about this. Um, anyway. I hope you enjoyed it. If not, I'm going to try to figure out how to put a link somewhere that you can go back to it. If not, this is only the third video on my channel. We've just started it, so won't be hard to get caught up. And I will get caught up making them before Shabbat. I will have all 7 readings up here for Matot-Masei. But that forehead plate is something else. Uh, the green-faced girls. I want to speak just a second about the version that I'm reading from. It is the uh, Michaan edition. Michaan. I'm still not sure how to pronounce that. Let me give you the spelling so you can look it up if you want to get your own copy, because there's definitely information in here with it has the commentaries and Rashi and Onkelos and all that. It's built in the text so it reads like one smooth story. It does have footnotes, and we'll get into some of them today, but it reads so smooth. It does get kind of confusing. There's so much information packed in here, but it is the Michaan edition, Michaan edition, is put out by the Quixote, Kehot, Publication Society, which is in New York. Um, this does deal a little bit with Chabad Hasidus. It's part of in this book. But if you want to get your own copy, I'm sure you can find one online somewhere. Um, again, it is the Michaan edition Humash. All right. Anyway, we are picking up in Numbers 32, verse 1, which is our third reading for Matot-Masei. Let me get a sip before I get started. I bet that cursor's showing up in the video. All right. The Israelites had camped in Sechon's territory, southern Gilead, ever since conquering it in Elul 2487. They had also conquered the Yazir district in Sihon's territory and Og's territory even further north. Of all the tribes, the descendants of Reuben and Gad had most appreciated the unique spiritual benefits of manna and were careful to eat it as much as possible, since for this reason they had slaughtered very little of their cattle for food. They had an abundance of livestock, very numerous, and they saw the land of Yazir and the land of southern Gilead, and behold, the place was a place uniquely suitable for livestock. The descendants of Gad, who took the lead in this matter, and the descendants of Reuben, who followed them, came and spoke to Moses and Eleazar the priest and to the princes of the community when they were all studying together, saying, the cities of Ephirot, Devon, Yazir, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elah, Savon, Nebo, and beyond, and their surrounding areas, and the land that God struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land uniquely suitable for livestock, and your servants possess much livestock. They said to Moses, if it pleases you, let this land be given to your servants as an estate. Do not take us across the Jordan. Even though the whole nation conquered this land, and it was therefore the property of all the tribes, we ask that it be given to us in exchange for the land that we would have taken on the west side of Jordan. Because of their lofty intentions, Moses agreed to their idea in principle, but he had one major misgiving. Moses said to the descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben, should your brother go to war while you stay here? Why do you discourage the Israelites from crossing over the land that God has given them? They will think you're afraid of fighting the inhabitants of the land, and they'll become afraid also. This is what your fathers did when I sent them to Ritmah near Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. They went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, and they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land that God has given them. God became angry that day, and he swore, saying, none of the men 20 years old and over who come out of Egypt will see the land that I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for they did not follow me wholeheartedly, except for Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite. and Joshua, son of Nun, for they followed God wholeheartedly. Caleb's father, Jephunneh, had died, and his mother was Kenaz. So his mother married Kenaz, so Caleb was Kenaz's stepson. God became angry with Israel, and he made them wander in the desert for 40 years until the entire generation had done evil in their eyes of God had died out. And behold, you now have risen in place of your fathers as a society of sinful people to add to the wrathful anger of God against Israel. If you turn away from following him, he will leave Israel in the desert again, and you will destroy this people. They approached him and said, we will build pens and similar enclosures for our livestock here, and cities for our wives and children. They mentioned animal pens before the cities because they were more concerned for their livestock than they were for their families. Verse 17, we will then arm ourselves quickly and serve as front lines each of the Israelite troops. For we are valiant, and we also rely on Yaakov's promise that the descendants of Gad will be successful warriors. We will not leave them until we have brought them safely to their place. In the meantime, our wives and our children will reside in the fortified cities we now build on account of the inhabitants of the land. Not only will we help our brethren conquer the land, we will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites has taken possession of his inheritance. In fact, it took them 7 years to conquer it and another 7 to divide it up. And the warriors of Reuben and Gad did not return to the eastern side of Jordan until the end of these 14 years. For we will not inherit with them on the other west bank of Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us here on the east bank of Jordan. It's a very short portion today, but something caught my attention here, and I am going to start going into a few little things like this because it needs to be done. We said there in verse 17, we will then arm ourselves quickly and serve as front lines of each of the Israelite troops. So they're not only going to go with the rest of the tribes, they're going to be the forefront. They're going to be on the front lines. And that's something really amazing. And we'll see why here in just a minute. For we are valiant, and we also rely on Yaakov's promise that the descendants of Gad will be successful warriors. Well, I got to looking at that and wondering, well, where does it say that Gad was going to be successful warriors? Well, the footnote down here is 49:19. I'm going to go to 49:1 and 2 first, just so you understand what's going on. So the time is 49:1 says, Yaakov then called for his sons and said, assemble yourselves, and I will tell you what will befall you in the end of days. But God did not want to divulge this information, so he withdrew it from him. So instead, he said, gather together around me and listen, sons of Yaakov. Listen to your father Israel, and I will tell you about the events that will befall your progeny in the future. So that's what's going on here. He's setting down all the heads of the tribes, all his sons, and he's telling them what's going to happen in the future because he's going to be passing away in the not too distant future. They just had the Battle of Midian, and God had told him that shortly after this battle, you're going to die. So that's why they were so hesitant to go into battle, but they did anyway. And we saw that story about the flying army. If you missed that, go back to the first reading. Yeah, so in 49:19, although Gad himself might be weak, his descendants will be valiant. Troops will march forth from the tribe of Gad, and they will return on their same tracks after conquering their enemies without having suffered any casualties. This prophecy was fulfilled in the men of the tribe of Gad, who, after having taken possession of their heritage to the east of the Jordan River, accompanied their tribes to its west bank and helped them conquer and settle their territories, only afterward returning to their own land. Well, that's very interesting, but there's still there's still something missing there. So I looked down at the footnote and it says Genesis. I'm sorry, that was in Genesis 49:19. Um, it says above 47:2. Well, let's take a look at 47:2. I'll start at 47:1 to kind of put things in perspective. But we're learning about Gad here and about why is he such a hero? Sounds like a tough dude. 47:1 of Genesis. Joseph then came to Paro as follows: My father and my brothers have come to Canaan, together with their flocks and their herds and all their possessions, and they are now in Goshen. He selected from among his brothers those 5 men who looked the least robust and introduced only them to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh would not be inclined to conscript them in his army. These 5 were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, and Benjamin. Using a different criteria, the 5 who looked the least robust were Gad, Naphtali, Dan, Zebulun, and Asher. So we see there that from the time that Joseph, while he was ruling in the land of Egypt, when his father and brother arrived there in Goshen, he was afraid to show the stronger brothers to Paro. So instead of showing them Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, and Benjamin, it said these were the least robust. In other words, they were puny. Right? So they were not too strong. Gad, Naphtali, Dan, Zebulun, and Asher. But we see later in life, by the time we get to Matot-Masei, right after the Battle of Midian, and he's uh, dividing the lands up. They were the first ones to get it. But it said there, "For we are valiant," back in chapter 32, verse 17, "For we are valiant, and we also rely on Yaakov's promise that the descendants of Gad will be successful warriors." So now we find out, back when he was with Joseph and had just came into the land of Egypt, he was puny. He was least of the robust. And Joseph showed him and his other 4 puny brothers to Paro because he didn't want Paro to put them in his army. Um, so Gad ends up being the hero. Not only did he accept the land on the east side of the Jordan, uh, he helped all of his brothers go forward and defeat and get settled before he even returned home. And I think that was really something special. It's been a short reading today. Um, I'm going to try to go ahead and get another one out sometime tonight or early in the morning to get caught up. And we'll go forward with our 4th reading. Thank you for your time. Hope you got something out of that. Please like, share, subscribe, leave me a comment. What do you think about me adding a little bit extra and reading some of the other commentaries in here other than the strict text? Um, we're learning some interesting things here, and I hope you're enjoying it. Have a great day. God bless.